Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm here today with Jonathan Benson. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Can you tell the audience, listeners, a little bit about, short summary, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Jonathan Benson. I like to call myself a professional test driver because it sounds way more fancy than saying YouTuber and tire tester. But I'm essentially a test driver that specializes in tire testing, and I have a YouTube outlet to help educate people on tires. A YouTube outlet and a website. It started with the website, and I'm a tire geek. I genuinely love tires.
Yeah. Well, this is good because the reason I wanted to get you on was I've spoken to loads of people about tyres and whatnot in different time, and everyone has their own perceptions. And for me, I think I also have this, like, the marketing has played a lot in my brain. And so I'd like to unpick a lot of that, like in the next, hour or so, about what is marketing and what is actually real substance. But let's wind back. How did you get into tyre testing, cars, etc.?
So I've always been a petrol head. I like some of my earliest memories of my dad's cars. He always liked his cars. He worked for British Aerospace, who owned MG Rover for a while. So he had lots of like Rover, like the 820 for test turbo and things like that. And then at points he had lease cars or hire cars. He had an XR4i Cosworth for a while. So I had a very good introduction to sort of the old school classics when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then it kind of evolved from there. I did a bit of karting when I was younger, played a lot of Gran Turismo, which is where I feel like I learned to drive.
I've just been playing the new one.
Oh, I haven't actually got it yet. I can't find a PS5 in the US, sadly. And then when I was 21, I got a brand new MG ZR. It was like my first proper new car. Beautiful little handling car. It's a Rover 25 with a body kit and some suspension tweaks.
Yeah.
But it was all part of this.
Super cool back then.
Oh yeah, it was the trophy blue with the big 17-inch wheels. Like, who would have thought? Nice. Like, back then, 17-inch wheels were huge, and now it's like that's what you get on your shopping car, your basic shopping car.
Yeah.
But it was all part of this British Aerospace owning MG Rover. It was on a maintenance agreement, so it was an amazing deal. Considering it was my first proper car, I was paying like $320 a month for the car and insurance and maintenance and everything. It was one-off payment.
Oh, wow.
So back then, this was early 2000s, like incredible. It came with a set of Michelin Pilot Sports, the original Michelin Pilot Sports. And obviously being a young idiot, I burnt through them in 3,500 miles. I burnt through the front tires in like 3,500 miles doing burnouts, or the best it could. It was the 1.4, so 105
Would it do
horsepower.
a good one-wheel peel, or did it have a bit of a diff in it?
It didn't have a diff on it. It would definitely do a one-wheel peel. I couldn't quite tripod it. I don't think it was that flexible.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I took it in for a tire replacement, and the agreement with the maintenance company was it was like for like tires. So I expected some Michelin Pilot Sports to be put on the front axle and thought nothing of it. Picked up the car, went for a drive, and I was like, this feels completely different. Like the turning had got a bit more spongy. Like the steering had just lost some of its like feedback, because obviously back then all cars had hydraulic steering racks and you could actually feel what was going on. And I got out and looked at the front tires, and they were Michelin, but they were the Pilot Exalto PE2s, which then became, confusingly, that tire line then became the Pilot Sport non-S line. We can go over that later. Michelin's naming convention is famously wonderful. So I was like, why do they're both Michelin tires. I spoke to the garage and they're like, they're both sports tires. Why do they feel so different? And I went online, and there was no good information online at that point. I don't even think people were doing tire tests in the UK at that point, maybe Auto Express. And at the time I trained to be a web developer. So I was developing websites. I was actually running an e-commerce business, and I'd moved up into sort of mid-management quite early on, and I was missing developing. So I was like, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I miss developing. I've got no social life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a website about tires, because I find this fascinating. And then hopefully, because I'd had some experience with online marketing, hopefully after some time, some traction, no pun intended, I'll be able to get some like free sets of tires in the future. And then like tires are expensive things. I want to be doing lots of track days, and then hopefully people will send me tires. And then as things grew, and I realized this was back in 2006, I eventually started the website. So I'd had a few cars since then. And I'd had this idea back in like '03 and dragged my heels on it for a long time. And then I developed the website, marketed the website, and it just sort of snowballed with lots of work outside of work. I was lucky enough to be able to leave work 2013, 2014 to sort of concentrate on it full time. I started a website that was selling tires, so I was sort of self-marketing, but then I realized there's absolutely no money selling tires online. But by that point, there was so much traffic going through the website, so probably 3 million page views a month. And that's people like fully engaged in the tire market.
That's a lot.
So I could start selling advertising to the tire manufacturers that gave me enough money to do tire testing full time.
Yeah.
So that's basically where we'd got to. And then YouTube, my dream was never to be a YouTuber. There was nothing being on camera. For me, it's the worst part of the job. Like, I get really jealous of the magazine testers who get to turn up at a test site, do their testing, and then just go away and think about the data for months and not have to worry about filming it and then just write it up. So being on camera isn't my thing, but at some point, if you're trying to create this like image of yourself that says you are the tire person, like you are the reference for tires, you've got to be a face. So I did start YouTube probably properly like 3 or 4 years ago, although there is some like really old stuff on the channel, and that annoyingly but unexpectedly really launched like just the image of me, I guess, the image of Tyre Reviews and me. And that's when like the tire companies really started like fully engaging. And that's how I'm in this position now, that I'm fortunate enough to have the respect of the tire industry in Europe and North America. Yeah. Tire testing is, I'm sure we'll get onto it, but tire testing is incredibly complicated, and you can only do it at very specialist facilities. And these tire manufacturers allow independent testers like myself, like Auto Express, like Evo, like a lot of German magazines, to use their facility because they trust you to make a good test and do it independently.
And let's say Michelin invites you down and says you can use our facility. Is that like you can use our facility whenever you like, or you can come down on this day and we'll chuck you some tires, you can bring some other tires? How does that work?
So it honestly, it depends what the idea is. So let's take, for example, the Pilot Sport 5. It's just come out. What I'm about to say isn't strictly true because I'm doing it in a different way. But Michelin have the Pilot Sport 5. They know it's a very good tire because they'll have done they'll have done internal testing against all the rivals on the market. So they know roughly where the tire benchmarks. They know it's either best or in the top 2 or 3 in pretty much every test. So Michelin will either come to me or I'll go to Michelin. I'll be like, hey, Michelin, look, you've got this new tire out. There's loads of interest. Like, people want me to test it. Can we organize a test? Like, I'm going to run the test myself, obviously independently. I'm going to invite your competitors. I'm not going to tell you who. I'm just going to invite them, and I'll either buy the tires or ship the tires, get the tires shipped directly to you. And then I'm going to come and we're going to run like a full barrage of testing. So it's not quite as simple due to how busy these facilities are. It's not quite as simple as to just turn up in France and be like, hey, I want to do a test. It does take weeks, if not months, of organization and getting a slot. And then like for each, so we're doing 10 sets of tires. So I'm going to Goodyear in a couple of weeks to do a 10 set tire test. That's 100 tires we're using because we've got 2 sets. One for dry, a set for dry, a set for wet. We have a spare and then one for rolling resistance. And then we're doing noise testing. Like there's a certain sequence you have to do as well. Like you do the low wear stuff first, like the noise and aquaplaning. Then you go on to the high grip stuff. So you don't wear out a tire doing one thing and then try and use it for something else. Like it's a complicated process.
Is that one of the hardest parts of the whole thing? Like the logistics of putting that stuff together?
It certainly can be, especially for the winter tests, because I'm midway. I'm actually going to Michelin tomorrow to finish an all-season and winter test I'm doing with them. So we had 10 sets of winter, 10 sets of all season, 7 sets of worn tires, and then a couple of reference. So we had like a summer reference and a winter reference. No, maybe not for that test, but then we're starting the test. So I started that test in January up in Evelo in the Arctic Circle. So we've got to get all the tyres there, but the tyres have to be prepared in advance. So we don't test fresh tyres. So we run the tyres in. So they went off to DECRA, and then it must have 100, 200, about 220 tyres had 500 kilometers driven on them on the real world. Then they get shipped up to Evelo, which is inside the Arctic Circle. We then spend a week and a half testing them there. They then get packaged up and then sent back down to Clermont, which is center of France. And then I'm flying back to France to finish up the test. So logistics are incredibly difficult. It's not something I handle entirely on my own. Obviously, the tire companies that are supporting do a great job in helping. But yeah, there's a lot to it, that's for sure.
So when you're sending some tires and you're like, they need to have 500 miles on them. Let's say, we just mentioned Michelin or Continental or whatever. Do they organize that, or do you?
It depends. It depends on how. So each tire manufacturer has a different method that they believe is the best, obviously, for running in the tires. So sometimes the Michelin example is an extreme example. Like usually a bedding process will be like, if they haven't been bedded in advance, sometimes I'll just do it. And then it will be like, okay, I'll go do a couple of laps of wet handling to just take the surface off. The 500 kilometers is a very extreme example, but I thought I'd run with it this time just to see if it changed anything, because it does make, there's many arguments, because some tire manufacturers don't run the tires in at all, and I'm not with that, because I don't feel like that's realistic to the road, because you're only ever driving on a brand new set of tires once, and that's for the first like 2 miles. So like, why would you test them in that state? So then we always do some basic running in, but the whole 500 kilometer thing, I think it's great in theory, but if it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, you can save an awful lot of cost not running that many tires for that long, because it's that's a very expensive process, as is like full wear testing, which we can get to in a bit.
Let's talk into that particular process, the like bedding in of a new tire, like a race tire. You gradually warm it up, blah 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 blah, put it away, and then it's ready to go.
Let it set overnight, kind of thing. It obviously also depends who you listen to, because you don't see many of the F1 tires being like bedded in, what type of tire you're running. But that's the general consensus for like a track day slick or anything like that you're going to be using aggressively. Give it a gradual warm up heat cycle and then let it like cool properly.
And that changes the structure a little bit, and it's kind of ready to go.
Yes, in theory.
I've not done. So with a road,
I've not done any testing to confirm or deny that yet. So
okay. But that's the generally accepted, that's what people tell me to do sort of thing. Yeah. With a road tire though, I've never even remotely thought about it. Just like got in the car, driven it, job done. Now, is there is there a recommended thing you should do with your road tires to make them last longer?
No, not to make them last longer. I think there's a lot of
performance.
No, there's not officially, no. And I don't know anything that's proven otherwise. A lot of people will tell you, be careful for the first 50, 100, 150 miles. They'll talk about mold release. A lot of tire manufacturers don't actually use mold release anymore, but there is some truth to the first X amount of miles could be slippy, especially in the wet, because as tires sit, obviously they're cured in an oven. Once they come out, they sit. And then a lot of the oils that are in a part of the compound, a lot of them can like sort of escape to the surface of the tire. So you end up with, if your tires, likewise, if you have a tire in the garage for 2 years and you put it in your car, you'll just have a slightly slick surface. So you should be careful for the first sort of 20, 30 miles. But I've heard people say like, drive your tires carefully for the first 500 miles. I'm like, I don't know anything that's concrete evidence to say that will extend the life of your tires or improve the performance. There's no data there.
That rumor mill that I've heard, and it's like, if you get a new car now, most engines are running a dyno anyway. They're ready to go, pretty much. Yeah. But like, I've had engine work done on my race car. You get in the car, you warm it up properly, work it through the revs, and then you're off. Like, fine. Tires, scrub them a bit and
Yeah.
and you're off. Whereas a road car,
Well, you still see, did I see Lotus the other day recommending for the first 1,000 miles, no more than 3,000 RPM? And that, I'm sure that used to be a thing when manufacturing tolerances weren't quite as exact as they are now. But in my head,
different manufacturers.
Yeah, true. We are Lotus, but it is a Toyota engine, isn't it? So, in my head, and the way I've always run in new cars is if it hasn't blown up in the first 20 miles, go and thrash it and like really seat everything, like get everything really hot.
Yeah.
Treat it really badly, apart from putting like low RPM, high load. So if you're going uphill in fifth gear at 2,000 RPM, that's bad. But just go give it a good thrashing. Yeah. Go give it a good thrashing once it's warm.
Some cars, I feel like my M2 was like this. I feel like there's different fluids in it to start with. Like there's like slightly different oil, and the oil gets
the first 1,000 miles.
The rumor in the first 1,000 miles, it picks up like lots of bits of kind of metal dust or whatever. I don't know.
Well,
like this is what they say. Like,
this is what all filters are
like
for.
All this stuff.
And I'd be really worried if there was lots of metal dust being built up in a brand new BMW engine, because that sounds like the engine hasn't been built properly. I'm not an engine expert. I'm not a tire expert, to be honest, but I know more about tires than I do about engines. I've always had really good results just killing them from cold. Killing them from new, not cold. Like letting them warm up, first drive, make sure it doesn't blow up, and then just give it a real good time.
Yeah. Like it's designed to rev it out. If you don't rev it at all for like thousands of miles, like surely like people are like, oh yeah, that needs to loosen up. Like,
well,
that involves revving it.
My dad had a Skoda Octavia VRS, which is the EA AAA engine in the Golf GTI and everything. So it's a great 2-litre turbocharged engine. And he had it from new, and he ran it in for 1,200 miles, and then he always drove for economy. So he probably never span up the turbo. He was always at 1,000 to 2,000 RPM and pootling along. And I bought it from him, and it's now got the weirdest like flat spot between sort of 3,500 and 4,500 RPM, where I need to get it looked at. But it's like, I'm sure if you just thrash it, Italian tune-up, isn't it? If you just give it some, like at least once a month when the engine's hot, your engine's going to work better. The rev limiters. I took someone on a track day once, and I was teaching them to drive. And he was at every braking point, I was like, brake, come on, harder. Why aren't you braking hard? He's like, I don't want to damage the brakes. Like, what do you mean damage the brakes? It was a 911 GTS and 997. It's like, dude, these brakes are designed to stop a car. You don't have to like gently press them, just smack them. Anyway.
Yeah. Or don't come on a track day.
Yeah, well, it was a frustrating. I don't like doing the passenger seat tuition at the best of times. So that was particularly frustrating.
And that I'm not this person, possibly not, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone that has that slight mindset might do a couple of laps, just like using the brakes a little bit. Brakes probably warm up, and then would just from like warm, just straight in the pits, turn the engine off, handbrake on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
that is how you fuck your brakes.
Yes. We're lucky to have some good knowledge and experience with cars, that's for sure. But I tell you what, speaking of treating cars badly on track, test cars, like, wow. Like, whenever I've had my own car that I use for track work, it gets treated like an absolute princess. Like 3 warm-up laps, 3 warm-down laps. It's like everything I do, I'm scared of breaking it. I'll do a tire test. Like, if I'm doing 15 sets of tires in a day on dry handling, it's literally pull into a garage. You've got 1 or 2 people changing your wheels for you. So wheels off, wheels on. You drive out the garage, do 4 laps of like max handling, 3 or 4 depending on like your times. Half a warm down lap if you're feeling kind. Straight in the garage, engine off, handbrake or whatever, and like you're just doing that on rotation all day. Stop, engine off, start, run. And these cars, we use a lot of VW Golfs for testing. Everything from like the 1 litre triple or the 1.4 TSI up to the GTIs. And they work, and they generally last pretty well. You can, like, a test ago, I was using a 67,000 kilometer Mark 7 GTI. All the miles have basically been test miles, and it was just starting. It was just starting to like grumble, when it was getting really hot. And this was in the south of France, so we were testing at nearly 40 degrees. You could feel it was starting to pull the power on some of the hard acceleration pulls. But you'd be surprised.
That is impressive.
Yeah, very. But you'd be surprised how some well-regarded track cars by German manufacturers don't last as well as you think. The most impressive is the old V8. I can't remember the part number, but it's the original C63. Continental have got an OG C63 that's got over 100,000 kilometers on it, and the thing just still absolutely perfect. Like original suspension, original engine, and it just sounds amazing and goes amazing. Like that's an impressive car.
Some cars, they're not necessarily built to last forever. Like the suspension components are like lifed. And then you need to change them at whatever, 30,000 miles, you've got to do this, 50,000 miles, you've got to do this, especially if you're doing sort of more track work. But yeah, so you normally use like Golfs and stuff like that. That's often. Is that because of that's a typical customer, like a typical representative of a car, or it's not really? It's just what's available.
Ignoring the Mark 8 Golf, the Mark for me, the Mark 7 Golf, or Mark 7.5 is peak Golf, and that if it's peak Golf, then it has to be peak car because the Golf is the every car. Like it's just the ultimate. It's just a very good hatchback. So the advantage of a Golf is, like you say, it's ubiquitous. I don't know if it still is, but it was the best-selling car in that segment for a long period. It fits a lot of wheels and a lot of wheel sizes, which is always useful, including the GTIs, because you can go from 17 up to 19 or 20 on a GTI, so that's useful. And the Mark 7, nice steering, nice balance. You could turn traction control off fully, so you had in a GTI, sometimes you'd have to pull an ABS fuse, and they were reliable. And you'll find a lot of testers, if you're testing that segment, it will be a Golf. I've seen a few people use Seats more recently, or Cupras, or Formentas, or whatever their brand is called. But essentially, they're all Golfs, aren't they? They're all VAG Group.
Yeah.
Reliability. But then I obviously as a driver, I'd much rather be testing in like a 911 or a GT3 RS or an M2 or something like that. Yeah. But we don't get to do the fun stuff all the time. So Golfs are just like the go-to car.
Yeah.
But don't get the Mark 8. Okay. The Mark 8. If you spent much time in a Mark 8 Golf.
I've not driven it. Someone brought one to my house and I had a look at it and was like, And then all I've heard is not good things since. I won't go on a rant, but yeah, it feels like a very rushed out product, and a lot of the engineering choices in not only like the steering rack and suspension, but just like the infotainment system, the fact like how much you can turn the traction control off. They've made a lot of odd choices, which is really sad. It's a nice looking car, but it's dynamically it's a big step back. Gone with, I'd say like current generation-ish cars, lots of cars being released, the Golf as an example, where we've gone to like probably what is like peak touchscreen, and actually everyone's gone, nope, like you guys are saving money by doing this and you think it looks better and people like it, but it is significantly worse.
It's just not safe. Like if you can't, like the volume controls on the Golf Mark 8, they're not illuminated. So if you're trying to like mess around with the bit underneath the screen in the dark, you're stabbing around. You can't turn the radio off from the steering wheel anymore. I don't know why. Like it's about 20 taps to get to traction control, which I realize is something that's it's quite niche, turning off traction control, but you can't turn it fully off. So if you actually want it fully off, you have to pull the ABS fuse. Then the car has some god awful brake balance, and it's just It's a struggle. The GT, to be fair, the Mark 8 GTI, if you reprogram it, because VW implemented a very like high level of security for like user programming to keep the car. I assume to keep the cars coming back to the dealers. So there's only a couple of people in Europe outside of VW that can actually reprogram them properly to allow you to fully, and it's not fully, but it's mostly off for the traction systems. But it's very expensive. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and anyone with a Mark 7 Golf, keep hold of it, because at some point in the future, we'll look back and be like, that was peak car. That was it. Yeah. Forget your GT3 RSs, that Golf, peak everyday car.
Does everything. Yeah. Well, I was looking through various videos that you've done and stuff like that, and you covered a lot of topics that I feel like people are probably interested about. That's probably why you did it. But one of the ones was running wider tires, and that could be at the front, at the back, but in general. And the concept most people in their head, but I feel, believe a wider tire gives you more grip. Now, it's quite a big topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I kind of want to leave because it's what you'll find. There'll be people that will quote like pressure per square, like by going like having a larger contact patch, you're reducing the pressure. So grip, friction will be the same overall because it's different pressure distribution. What those, again, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm probably going to get a lot of it wrong. What they're assuming with that, people who say that, they're assuming the grip is purely mechanical, and it's not. There is a certain amount of like chemical interaction between the tire and what's going on in the tire and the surface of the road. So it's very grip is very, very complicated, like way beyond my modest knowledge of it, and it's not quite that simple. Now, obviously, if wider tires didn't give you more grip, Formula One or everyone would be running on like narrow tires to save fuel, like or to save aerodynamic wake, because wide tires, they mess up the air. So it's certainly not true that all tires give you the same, all sizes of tires give you the same grip, and wider certainly does give you more grip. In the video test you've seen, that wasn't, so that's quite an old video, and that wasn't quite, and basically I need to redo it because we used a 320D, I think. We were expecting an M3, but there were some issues getting the car in time. So we ended up running on a 320D, which didn't really have enough grip to overpower the extra rear end grip you got with the wide tire. But then also by changing, like BMW as an example, by having staggered sizes and going to a square setup, whether you're reducing the rear size or up in the front size, you're changing the balance of the car as well. So if you've gone from like a 255 rear and a 225 front to a 255 square, what you're giving yourself is a more grip at the front axle to turn in. And that in return, for me, for my driving style, like it makes me a quicker driver. So even if it's not purely down on grip, by changing the balance of the car, you're also like affecting the lap time. But it definitely, wider tires in most situations will give you more grip, but there are some caveats.
Same compound, everything.
Yes, yeah. Finding, so like you might have, this is a fictitious example. You might have a Pilot Sport Cup 2 in 225 40 18, and then you might be able to get it in like 335 30 18 or whatever. And just because they're both Cup 2s and just because they've both got the same tread pattern, I bet one's wider, they might be different compounds as well. Because as tire width increases, the tire manufacturers do change the mixture to better cope with the demands those tires are expected to be placed on. And then obviously, again, if you start looking at things like Porsche N-rated tires, then it's a whole different kettle of fish. Like it's okay.
This is a topic I wanted to talk about, which was, let's say, your Cup 2 or whatever, a sort of a tire that you can buy, and then you go to, depending on the website or wherever you try and buy them from, it might just say Cup 2.
Yeah.
Or certain websites are like, they've got like 14 different versions of the same tire. One's for Ferrari, one's for Michelin, one's for whatever. Now, how much do those change? And I guess this is some more than others, maybe. Like, and in your experience, have you done a few of the different ones next to each other?
So it's a good. So there's no one answer because you've got 100 different car marks and 100 different types of tires and 100 different intentions of the tires.
Yeah.
So it could be like the tires that come on the GR Yaris. I got it the right way around. That's a Michelin Pilot Sport 4S that is Toyota approved, but from what I understand, it's nearly identical to the aftermarket version. And I think in that case, it was a kind of reverse, that they made this tire for Toyota, and actually it was what Toyota wanted from the tire to go with the GR Yaris was the blend of qualities they'd want in an aftermarket tire. So they released it as an aftermarket tire. Yeah. Then I've got quite an in-depth video that I did shot with Michelin about OE versus aftermarket, and that was with the Pilot Sport 4S, which everyone knows and loves.
Right.
And Michelin developed with BMW a 4S star marked 4S. So that's the star is BMW's OE marking. Now the star marked 4S was, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was about 3 seconds a lap faster in the dry. And that's because they'd moved from, it's essentially a completely different tire. They'd spent 2 or 3 years on development. They'd done countless prototypes. This is for is it the G80, the new M3, M4?
Yeah, I think
countless, maybe G20. Anyone? I'm not sure. I've lost it.
I don't know.
Yeah. E92 was the last one I had, so that's the last one I know. There's countless prototypes, years of testing, and what they'd ended up with, instead of the aftermarket 4S, which everyone knows and loves, it's one of the best ultra performance or UUHP tires on the market, and that's a dual compound tire. So you've got like a slightly stickier compound on the shoulder that works better at warmer temperatures, that deals well with cornering grip. Then you've got a more silica-based compound in the center and inside, which is better for wet grip and longevity and rolling resistance and things like that. They'd moved from a dual compound to a quad compound. So there was 4 compounds on this tire instead of 2. And this is exactly the same size. And 2 of the compounds were essentially Cup 2 compounds. So they'd made this, they'd called it the 4S Star, but it was essentially a hybrid tire. Yeah. It was essentially a Cup 2 crossed with a 4S. And this is the manufacturers now, AMG, Porsche, I'm sure Ferrari to a certain degree, what they're looking for is a tire that's optimized for dry performance and dry handling for their top of the top cars. And there's only one reason why, and that's Nürburgring lap times. If I'm saving 2 seconds around Michelin's test track, which is a 55-second lap, imagine how many seconds you're saving around the Nürburgring. So by making this tire that is optimized for dry, so you do lose out in the wet, and it is the tire that comes with the car along with the OE Pirelli tire, BMW might be making a minute around the Nürburgring. That might be a little bit optimistic, but they're making a chunk of time, and that's awesome for
time.
That's awesome for marketing. And then you have Porsche, who obviously the Cup 2R was developed, as far as I'm aware, with Porsche.
To smash records.
To go around. It's essentially it'll last a lap of the Nürburgring at peak, to smash lap records there. And it's an astounding tyre. And then the other things I've heard that people find interesting is like Porsche versus Ferrari, the development lines for those two, while they both marks do want performance, from what I understand, and this isn't from any particular tire manufacturer, from what I understand is the Porsche tire is going to be more optimized for the driver, and the Ferrari tire is going to be more optimized for the, I don't know the kindest way of saying it, but the rich Russian, maybe. So the person that buys a Ferrari and has a super high performance car but doesn't really want to drive it, they want to like parade around Salone Street or New Bond Street or whatever. So wet grip and comfort and everything, like it's more of a blended performance. Whereas someone who's buying a GT3 RS, what do they want from the tire? They're not going to, normally they're less likely to be parading around London and more likely to be hitting the Spanish roads or the track. So even with those two marks where you think they'd be very similar, admittedly different engine layout, but you think they'd have quite similar goals, there is actually quite different goals between them. So there's a lot that
interesting.
The amount of work that goes into OE tires is, especially for the big marks and the high performance vehicles, is incredible. And companies like Pirelli, who are OE on like every supercar that exists, every Lamborghini, every Ferrari, a lot of Porsches that come out, all the specials, they're essentially, it might be a P0, but it's the P0 you're getting on your Lamborghini is very different than the P0 you're going to get on your BMW and this and that. So it's all the same name, but it's serious work. It's really serious work. But even for things like Golfs or whatever, there'll be a lot of work to optimize rolling resistance, to optimize comfort without sacrificing wet grip. And to, like Audi do a lot of work with tire manufacturers with the foam matting, so they can choose, the sound deadening technology that goes into like A6s and things like that. And they bond foam to the inside of the tire, like very simple but very effective. Like it can drop sound by about 3 decibels internally, which is like double the sound pressure. But they will they will even tune the foam to work with that particular vehicle and suspension and things like that. So OE is definitely not a marketing exercise to get you to buy tires for the vehicle. They are in a lot of cases they are tuned, but then you've got to think, once a tire is OE, what a lot of people don't realize is once a tire is marked OE, so like the Michelin Pilot Supersport that came with the BMW M2 originally, that Pilot Supersport that you'll buy now, unless they've been through another OE program, is exactly the same tire that got homologated back when the M2 was in development. And that's what, 10 years ago. So now you've got the question is a 10-year-old Pilot Supersport, because Michelin aren't allowed to change anything about that tire without going through a new homologation loop. So then the question is, sorry if I'm talking so much, is the 10-year-old Pilot Supersport that was designed for that vehicle better than the 4-year-old Michelin Pilot Sport 4S, which wasn't designed for that vehicle? So that's where it gets really complicated. And for every OE tire, there's going to be a crossover between which is better, the older developed tire or the newer undeveloped tire. And that's a question that is so difficult, because people ask me all the time, and it's almost impossible to answer without testing it, because it really depends on what the design goal, like that Pilot Supersport that came with the M2, it's a BMW M car, so it's very dry focused. So compared to a modern tire in the wet, it's sketchy. Like, it's really sketchy, but I'm pretty sure, is it the same size or is it a different size? It's the same tire or a very similar tire that's coming out on the BMW Supra, so the Z4 and the Toyota Supra. So that comes with a BMW marked Pilot Supersport. And like, in terms of wet performance, that tire's been long overtaken. So in that case, you could be buying a new car, swapping the tires out for a set of 4Ss that weren't intended for that car, and getting a significant increase in things like wet performance, comfort, rolling resistance, and maybe equal or losing out a little bit in the dry.
Yeah, I had that with my, I have a 997
very nice
GT3 RS.
Beautiful.
And that came on Pilot Sport Cups.
The original cups.
That's what they were, I think. Which were just horrific in the wet. If they were hot, they were fine.
Like, you can't get them hot on the road in the wet. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not in the UK. But then, so when the new Cup 2s came out and they started getting N-rated, I don't know what it was. There would have been a GT3 RS had come out, 991, don't know, .1 or something. As soon as they'd got that N rating, and it was like N1 and then there's an N2 as well, I put them on. And I think I actually put them on before Porsche then have said, like now, say you can put those on those
cars. Is it the same size or is it a slight?
And you keep your warranty. So I went same size, which was like 325, 30, 19 or something. And so much better in the wet. Like so much better in the wet and last much longer. Like great. But then you get, another thing within that is you've mentioned, let's say, your car comes and it has a Michelin option and a Pirelli option. And it could come on either. And definitely marketing / the internet would say, get the Michelin all day long. It's so much better. Now, obviously you have to test a certain tire, but how similar are those two options? Not saying one's better than the other, on a car that you've tested.
So I have yet to test on a BMW an OE comparison. So an OE between the Michelin and the Pirelli. So it's a good example on BMWs, because I see people that have had their M2s, M3s, M4s delivered on the Pirelli P0 Star Mark tire, and they're crying on the forum saying, I'm going to return the car to BMW. I don't want it. If the OE program has gone as well as it should have, in theory, those two tires should be nearly indistinguishable, because the goal of the OE program is to have multiple options of tires delivering the same performance. Now, obviously with two different manufacturers, with two different design ethoses, two different manufacturing technologies, there are going to be some differences. But in theory, it should be way closer. Like a star marked Pilot Sport 4S and a star marked P0 should be much closer in performance, because they're intended for that vehicle and application, and they've been tested by BMW for years to get them as close as possible to each other than the aftermarket version. So in a scenario where Michelin did used to have a lead over Pirelli in the aftermarket, and I think they probably still do, although Pirelli have sort of renewed their aftermarket emphasis recently because they identified they've been too focused on OE. So Pirelli have been caught up in this, like, we're going to be OE for everything. And then that's great because the theory in the industry is if you buy a new car, you'll fit the same tires, the OE tires, for the first 2 or 3 times, and then you'll start looking at the aftermarket. And Pirelli wanted that market, which is fine. But they've also realized with that focus, their aftermarket tire range has perhaps fallen a little bit behind where they should be. So they're renewing all their tires. And the latest P0, I believe it won Evo recently, one of the Evo tire tests. It was up the front with Michelin. So in theory, the latest generation of Pirelli and Michelin are very similar. I haven't seen any wear tests between the two. That's normally where Michelin have a bit of an advantage. But no, to answer your question, the OE tires in theory should be very similar to each other in performance. So there shouldn't.
Right, because I have an M340i Touring.
Nice.
And that's on Pirelli, P0, whatever's. Whenever you drive a BMW press car, they're always on the Michelins.
Yes.
Even though they could be on either. Don't know why. And everyone says to me, they're like, you should put it on the Michelins. Put it on the Michelins. Just take them off, put it on the Michelins. And I know if your car came on run flats, absolutely get rid of run flats if that's number one. My main thing with that car would be ride comfort, really, and probably noise and just all round kind of usability rather than outright performance or anything. And actually, the tires are quite. I've used them in the wet, and they're pretty good. But everyone's telling me the Michelins are like 50 times better.
I think everyone's a little bit optimistic there, or someone at BMW who's done a very bad job on their OE program. I think you would be insane to take off. Like if for whatever reason you bought it used and it came on like the Wusung ditch finders, like some Chinese tire that was atrocious, I'd be like, take them off, like throw them away. But to take a tire off without needing to because of wear, like a tire like Pirelli, to take it off and just replace it with another premium brand Michelin isn't like you have to have more money than sense, I think. But I would encourage you, because the beauty of tires is you do eventually change them. I would definitely encourage you, when it comes to needing a new set of tires, stick the Michelins on and see what you like. Let me know what you think. Let everyone know what you think. I think it will be closer than you think. And the other thing that's very difficult to keep in mind is you're testing like old for new when you put a new set of tires on. So you might have run those Pirellis for 15,000 miles. And at the end of 50,000 miles in a couple of seasons, they've gone through temperature changes. Their compound is like, you've got very little tread depth left. So the block movements, the tire might feel stiffer and more sporty because as the tire wears, like the steering response gets better and your rolling resistance is going to get better and they'll actually get quieter, but wet grip's going to drop off significantly. And wet grip is probably the easiest thing to feel on the road, because to really push like the limit of dry grip handling on a car like yours on the public roads, it's essentially illegal. So wet grip is your only real benchmark. And after 2 years and 15,000, 20,000, whatever miles, that P0 at 1.6 mil is going to have significantly worse wet grip than even a new P0. So if you put a new Michelin on, it's difficult to kind of keep that headspace. And definitely Michelin make good tires. I'm not denying that. They make some of the best tires in the world. I think over an entire product range, Michelin still probably has the edge. But I don't think the gap is quite as vast as everyone says it is online. And I feel like if people bought your car on Michelins, wore them down to 1.6 mil, and then put on a set of Pirellis, they'd be like, oh, wow, these are comfortable and great in the wet now. Like there is, once you get this sort of momentum of people moving away from something to Michelin, they then had this old versus new experience. They're like, wow, these are amazing. And like Michelin tire, the 4S is an amazing tire. I'm just saying it's not 50 times better than any other tire on the planet. And that's for sure. Yeah. You'd be crazy to think that.
That's an interesting point, that most people are trying an old tire versus a new tire, which is like, it's a rubbish comparison.
So obviously when testing, we're super strict on like keeping everything exactly the same for every single set of tires. So the comparisons we do, and I'll get it on you. Like obviously, YouTube comments are the best place in the world for user feedback because everyone's an expert. And you'll get people commenting like, "Oh no, your test is wrong. I had these set of tires, and I've got this set of tires, and this set of tires is way better." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're comparing old to new across years. Like there's no. I'm comparing the same things on the same day. We also." What people also forget is like, oh, I ran this set of tires at new at this track day, and then a month later I went back with another set of tires and ran 2 seconds a lap slower. I'm like, great, you changed the track temperature by 15 degrees. You're running 2 seconds a lap slower. You change you put some slightly different surface preparation. You're running there's so many variables people don't appreciate, and just. If we're doing let's say a wet handling test and we've got 10 sets of tires, every 3 sets of tires we're running a control tire. So we'll start the test with a control tire and then run 1, 2, 3 control, 4, 5, 6 control, 7, 8, 9 control, 10 control. Okay. And then you see the evolution of the surface. So if you've got a big temperature swing, if you've got a big temperature swing, your lap times might change by 2 seconds a lap. You're driving the same car. Yeah. The tires are the same, but what's happening is the grip of the surface is evolving throughout the day. And in things like wet handling, as you're driving, you're putting more rubber down as well, so you're making the driving line a little bit slippier. So there's a lot going on, and then we have to calculate. We look at the evolution throughout the day, and then we calculate that all back to the average of the test tires. So everything's as fair as it possibly can be. And obviously we're topping up the fuel lead between every run. So we're not there's so many different variables.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you see people like CarWow, who are an amazing YouTube channel. They do their 0 to 60s and braking tests. Yeah. It's in the world of tire testing, no one does acceleration tests because the variance is so high, even with launch control and automatic gearboxes. It's really, really difficult to do consistently. And then braking testing, if you're I find braking testing is not the worst thing in the world. That's being dramatic. It's definitely a talent and a skill that takes a certain mindset, because on a lot of tracks, unless the track's brand new and just been surfaced, if you're a quarter of a tire width off the line, you're braking, and in the wet it can change by 2 meters, and 2 meters is a huge difference. And then if the brake pressure you apply isn't exactly the same, you can be changing by a meter. If you start braking a little bit too late, you could you're changing by a meter. So you have to be so precise to get accurate data for these tires.
You need a robot.
Yeah. Some tire manufacturers literally use robots. Continental have Avia indoor braking analyzer, and it's like a roller coaster. It's a car on a roller coaster rail it's fully automated. So hydraulic pressure on the brake pedal and everything. And then you can get variance in ABS. Sometimes the ABS will just release for a split second longer for whatever reason. It's detected a little bit more slip on a wheel. You've got another meter of braking distance. So wet braking, you have a computer system that's recording every measurement you do, and you keep on running until the computer tells you, okay, you've got enough data points within a certain variance that we're now happy with this test. The test is green. And that's often 9, 10, 11 braking runs to get 6 or 7 good ones within a zone. That then you can be okay, I'm going to go change tires and do the next set. And then if you're doing that for 10 sets of tires with controls every 3, you're doing maybe 150, 200 braking runs in a day. And that's long. It's really long. But it's the only way of getting proper data, because if you go on a wet runway and put 2 cars next to each other and hit brake, it's meaningless. It's essentially meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, how do you then drive? Because your person on the internet that's I'm so much faster in this car on this day or whatever. There's so much subjective stuff about, unless you are, and even when you are a professional driver and you're I'm doing it's the repeatability side of it. How do you do a lap in a car and then repeat that lap, but using how does that get accounted for in the testing and stuff? Because obviously you're not going to do exactly the same.
So you generally, with something like dry handling or wet handling, you'll do 3 or 4 laps on average, and even more maybe. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes you make a mistake, so you right, hit the computer, delete that lap, ignore that lap. So we generally do 3 or 4 laps, and depending on the track, we're looking for a target variance. So normally it's about 0.3 to 0.5% per lap. So like Goodyear's Miraval circuit in a Golf is about 1:40. So there I'm kind of looking for anything between sort of 0.3 of a second is like an allowable variance for that lap time. And that is, I guess it's with experience, it becomes easier to do. And the thing you've got to remember is tire testing, you're not driving a qualifying lap every lap. You're driving like a good endurance race pace every lap, but you're not screeching around on the like you're at 9 3/4 tenths, not 10 tenths. So the errors you make when you're at 10 tenths tend to dissipate. And I find I drive more aggressively than a lot of tire testers because I can compare my own lap times at test facilities with the testers at the proving grounds or other testers, and I know what tires and cars. And I'm generally about a second a lap quicker or 2 seconds a lap quicker because I do drive it more like a track day lap than some of the tire testers do. But it is a very for scoring. Let me think about how to word this. For scoring tires, for an ultra high performance tire in the dry, obviously you're testing many factors, but like focusing on dry handling, which is very important for an ultra high performance tire like a 4S or something. You've got an objective thing, which is the lap time, and that is set by the driver. And even that can vary between driving styles, but then you have subjective scoring as well. So subjectiveness is like, how's the balance of the car? How's the feedback of the tire? How's the directness of the steering? Is there a delay as you steer? How is the on-center response? How does it build load? Like lots of things. And because like by the very nature of that, that's subjective, that's something that can vary quite a lot between test drivers. So a tire that everyone in the world seems to love, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S on track, is one of my least favorite tires on track just because it's quite a slow steering tire. But that's something that's, I realize that's something that's subjective to me, and on the road that doesn't really translate because you're not putting as much load through it. So you kind of have to think about dry handling or subjectiveness as, okay, what do I like? But also what's most applicable to a lot of people in the real world? And things like balance, like the ability to recover from understeer, how the tire reacts, like what's the progression when you sort of switch into oversteer. So there's lots of things we're grading on, and it does vary from test to test. So when you'll see like my test putting tire X as number one in the dry, and then another magazine will go on a different day using a similar vehicle and similar sets of tires and similar tire sizes, you can get some inversions in the result just through driving style. And it's, I guess, one of the beauty of modern tires is we've got so many good options. The options are all so good and so similar that things like driving style can actually cause a little bit of variance. But generally, the good tires will stay good and the bad tires will stay bad. I'm not sure if that answered.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your original question or not. I forgot what you asked.
Essentially, whilst the lap time, and I could see all sorts of reasons why that might vary loads, but that's not actually really what it's down to. Like you're not selling a 4S to a race team. It's not happening. So
you're not.
And generally, if you're racing on a controlled tire.
Exactly.
Ish.
But I think there's a lot of importance.
But so the subjective stuff.
There's a lot of importance in subjectiveness. And you're right. I think the ultimate 10/10th out of a tire isn't important for the average track day. But then you can argue that you want the highest level of grip on the road. So the fastest tire generally will have the highest level of grip laterally. And like if you want the ultimate grip on the road and the ultimate safety, that will be the tire that gives you that thing. But then I think a lot of people forget.
Is that necessarily the case? Like in terms of, I would say there's let's say the difference, an extreme example of these two things would be the highest level of grip might be a slick.
Yes.
And a slick that then once you've gone over a certain angle of yaw or whatever it is, drops off rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas you might have a treaded tire that you've got, rather than 2 degrees to play with, 3 degrees, you might have 8 degrees, which when you start to lose it is a big difference.
That's like I call that the progressiveness of the tire. So once you pass the limit, like how much communication and what's your window of operation. And on things like on winter tires on snow, that's incredibly important, because if you've got a tire that allows a little bit of movement, but still like the grip doesn't fall off a cliff quickly. That's a tire that's very controllable. Whereas a tire that has slightly higher peak grip, but then the grip drops down dramatically, then you've got you've got a problem in the snow, because once the grip's gone, you're spinning around.
Yes.
So yeah, there's definitely,
and the chance of that is high.
But you've also got to remember, like if you're on a track, you want good steering response, or if you've got a performance car, you want good steering response. You don't want a tire that takes a minute to obtain slip angle. Like if you've watched any of my videos where I've had a GoPro focused on like a front tire, the amount of front tire will fold underneath the car during cornering is that like it's unbelievable. And then that introduces further delays into the steering. So like for me personally, like on my Skoda at home, I've got an Octavia VRS in the UK. I chose to put the Continental Premium Contact 6 on, as opposed to I had the Goodyear Eagle F1 Asymmetric 5, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4, and the Continental Premium Contact 6. 3 premium tires, all in the same size. It was after a mini test. They were pretty much brand new, and I chose to stick with the Continental. And it wasn't because it was the best all-round tire. It's because it was the best, for me, the best steering position and quickness.
They sponsored your video.
No, I've never taken money for a tire test, and that's something I have to be frustratingly annoying on. Well, no, but I didn't tell it. I think you might be the first person that I've told I've kept the Continental on, purely because I like the steering response from it. It wasn't the most comfortable. It wasn't the best in the wet, but the margins were small. But for that car, it's a Skoda, but it's a VRS and it's quite a stiff chassis. I like the steering response, and for me, that was more important than having like the ultimate breadth of ability. Because arguably the other 2 tires were slightly better all round.
And if you take a couple of tires like that, a similar category, all the sort of big names, what sort of level of differences on those each segment are we looking at? Like you're saying you preferred the Continental versus the other 2. Now, how different are they? Like best to worst, not necessarily which is which.
Subjectively, it depends how sensitive you are. Because I think a lot of drivers wouldn't notice the difference between all 3. But then a lot of drivers like yourself, you've got a lot of experience in fast cars and very responsive cars. I think you would notice the difference. And I think you'd find subjectively, things like steering response, you would find quite big differences between like the Michelin and the Continental. In terms of grip, dry grip between the premium tires is very close. Dry braking, dry handling is generally within maybe 5-6% maximum. So in the dry, for me, subjective is more important, because if I'm getting an extra 3% dry lap time for a road tire, does that really matter? But if I'm getting something that I find very noticeable in steering response and subjectiveness, that's a bigger priority for me. In the wet, generally the top tires, the premium tires, are very close, but you do find sometimes that as you're going through like this generational update, so like Goodyear and Michelin have just updated, so the Asymmetric 6 has just come out and the Pilot Sport 5 has just come out, but the Continental version, the Premium Contact 6 and the P0, they're now, 4 or 5 years old, I think, maybe 4 years old. So naturally, the progress made by the more recent tires from the premium manufacturers is in theory going to give you a bit of an advantage. So you've also got to think about, when did this tire come to market? And for further complications, not all tires, but a lot of manufacturers will quietly midlife update the tire. So the Premium Contact 6 that came out 4 years ago probably isn't the same Premium Contact 6 that you buy today, but we don't know what's different because they haven't told us. But generally, the manufacturers, just to keep the tires relevant in the tests, because obviously everything's tested every year, they will put small updates in. And the only way you would know is you'd be buying a different IPC or EAN. But the name and the size and everything like that is exactly the same. It would just be a background change, and it's very difficult to know what you're getting. Tires are complicated.
That's an interesting part of it. Okay, that puts another spanner in this. You've bought a car, whatever, 2017, 2015, your second-hand car. It came on Pirelli's, Michelin's, and whatever, and you're like, well, if it's on 10-year-old spec P0s and you change it to a 4S or whatever, like a 5-year newer tire, you probably will notice a big difference between the tires. But then if the Pirelli has done an OE update,
OE's different.
time,
You're not allowed, once an OE pattern is locked, that's fixed for 10 years. They're not allowed to make any changes.
Okay.
Yeah. So to change an OE tire would have to be another homologation program. And that's why sometimes with Porsche, especially, you see N1, N2, N3. That's either a tire. More commonly, that's a tire that's come out for another car, another generation of car.
Yes.
That has the same tire size, because sometimes they'll change tire sizes and sometimes they won't. But sometimes they'll just run an internal, like an update program during a car's life. Porsche maybe less so actually, but I know Porsche take tires super seriously. They'll run a new OE tire for a facelift. So not even a new generation of car. So a 0.1 or a 0.2 will have a different OE tire from the 0.1. And that's when you'll get like an N1, N2, N3. Like it's the work Porsche.
Yeah, because I remember those coming out.
Yeah. Porsche do tires. Yeah. Like even for things like, so I was at Pirelli in Sweden and I was like, oh, you've got some like Porsche testing going. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's for the new Cayenne. I was like, there's a new Cayenne coming out because I bought a Cayenne in the US. They're like, oh, no, it's just a facelift. Yeah. I'm like, so sorry, you're making these are winter tires. I'm like, you are making new winter tires for a facelift. They're like, yeah, Porsche wants something completely, like every time Porsche put out a new car, they want it to be different. It's not like we're going to put a new bumper on it.
Yeah.
Like they're like some of the changes that you know better than anyone, but they're changing the suspension for a facelift. And it's like, what? How is this?
Yeah.
Like Porsche engineering is incredible. That's for sure.
It is. They are my favorite brand, and this is probably one of the reasons why you look at this sort of stuff, and it's
almost frustrating because I don't know about you. When I started tire testing, or when I was into cars, this was the time of Chris Harris, Evo, like Drivers of the Republic, like Porsche were the thing. And I'm like, you know what? Everyone loves Porsche. I'm not going to be a sheep. I'm not going to be that person just like, Porsche make the best cars. I'm going to find something else I love and like really like stick with that. And then I've been lucky enough to drive a lot of different supercars, and it comes down to Porsche make the best cars. They just do. It's frustrating, but if you've driven like a GT3 RS or a GT2 RS in anger, there's pretty much nothing better you can get for the road. Like the new 3RS is. I've spoken to a few test drivers, like tire test drivers, that have driven the new 3RS now, and they I've never seen a group like this. These are all individual people, and it's so consistent. This thing is insane. That is it's such a big step forward. They're like it's incredible. So like that is a car that everyone should be super excited about.
I'm really excited to see it. It's not something I necessarily want to own because like I'm not going to drive a car like that. I would rather have a race car and hammer that than take a road car. But I think off the back of AMG GT Black Series, for example, which is like a pretty loony looking thing, I think Porsche have gone, they're getting a bit close now. They're getting a bit close. Let's take it up. And even like new GT3 is much more of a serious car than previous generation GT3.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's so much more kind of like hardcore. And you're like, and then we have the RS, which has to be another jump.
Yeah, has any images been leaked of it yet? The RS.
There's sort of like not proper images.
I've heard,
I think just like massive wings.
That's what I've heard from people who have experienced. It's just like they're like, it's everyone says an RS is a race car for the road. You won't find like people who have driven. You probably like when people who have raced, you will probably have found that less. They'll be like the GT3 RS is an amazing road car, but it is a road car. But yeah, from what I'm hearing, the new RS will be a race car for the road, which is fantastic.
With this sort of new, with the new kind of RSs and stuff from like 991 kind of onwards, when you compare them to the Cup cars, and I've not driven a Cup car, but I think they're getting closer and closer and closer. And actually, if you take the GT2 RS and then go MR on it sort of thing, like that is a faster car than a Cup car, probably by quite a bit. If you could run it on the same tyres.
But a lot of that's to do with power as well. So obviously, what's a Cup car got? 500 horsepower?
Yeah.
and an MR2RS. I don't know what they are. A lot.
I don't know.
Yeah.
6 something. It's got to be 6
I'm
something.
surprised they're not in the 7s.
But I think, who knows? I think you just like sneeze on them and they're
One of the craziest experiences I've ever had in a car was I did a test with a 2RS at Ascari, and it was a part of a Goodyear Tyre event, and they kindly like let me have the afternoon to myself for the Supersport RS, the R&RS, which is their version of the Cup 2 and Cup 2R. Like, very good tyres. And I'd started the morning with the group and the tyre launch in the 3RSs, and they had a 2RS that I got to use in the afternoon for the test. So I ran the test in the 2RS, and then we had like 5 minutes at the end of the day, and I'd come into the pit lane, and I was like, oh, there's the 3RS there. Do you mind if I just jump in it and do like a couple of laps just so I've gone from a 3RS to a 2RS. What's it like going back to a 3RS? And I remember coming out the pits in third as I had in the 2RS, and the girls waving the flag so I can go. I'm like, brilliant. Put my foot down. I'm like, shit, the car's broken. Because there was so little power compared to the 2RS. I'm like, what? Why isn't this accelerating? I'm like, fuck. And then I'm like, hold on, this is a GT3RS. This is probably the best engine in any production road car ever. Yeah. I'm like, and it feels like it's broken compared to the torque of the 2RS. I just remember being so panicked for a split second until I realized I didn't have like 2 massive turbos giving me loads of torque. But yeah, what an experience! Like, what a pair of cars as well. Like you say, you don't you don't want to love Porsche, but then you drive Porsche and you love Porsche because
and they keep coming out with things that you're like, that's pretty cool. GT4 RS, pretty cool.
If I had some money,
and then they're difficult to get hold of, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. But your turbo experience is an interesting one. So I have a Radical SR3, which is 240 horsepower, something like that. 230 horsepower, but 550 kilos, 600 kilos of downforce at like 100 miles an hour.
I've been running a Ascari in an SR3 in the wet. Mind-bending what that can do.
Yeah. So Radical let me drive the other day their SR10, which is it's a different engine, but it's 440 horsepower and it's heavily turbocharged. And went out in that, and for the first like session, it's like, oh my God, this is crazy fast. And then you get used to it.
At any amount of power.
Just look at the data and go, it's stupid. And you get to I realized I was braking a lot for corners. I was at Snetterton that I probably wouldn't brake for so much. And let's say in an SR3, you're doing 130, let's say at the end of the start finish straight, like as a guess, and you brake a bit and do 120 around the first corner. You still can do 120 round it in the SR10, but you're doing like 165, and so before you get to it, but you just get used to it straight away.
It's scary to think about how quickly it becomes normal, and then you've readjusted. What is your normal? And then I'm guessing if you got back in your SR3,
and then you have to go back.
Must have felt like a Robin Reliant or something.
I've not driven it. I've not driven it since, but I'm slightly worried that
just
I need
drive
to
lots of slow cars in between.
Leave it enough
time.
Go
get a 1.4 Golf and do a road trip in it.
Rent a 1 litre something for a week. It's a good reset.
It's an incredible car though.
Okay, one of the things. So you do very very cool. And just mad. Like compared to road cars, those things are just. You can't do it. Once you've done that, attract it.
How's it compared to the 3RS?
Or even a test day. 3RS, genuinely, I've driven the Radical a lot now on track. Driven the 3RS a lot on track. And you get in that, it feels like absolute boat. Everything feels heavy. It takes ages to slow down. It's like not that quick. Really slow around corners. Like it's just completely ruined. It feels like you're braking the car.
And you're just like, it feels slow.
It's like you come in. One of the things as well, like race car versus road car, the cooling is sorted, like properly sorted. So you set your fastest lap, and then on the in lap you go flat out, and then you just drive into the pits, turn it off, whatever. Everything's cool. It's like nothing's going to set on fire, like all of that sort of stuff.
The Caprio T1. I don't know if that company ever made any cars, but that
Yes.
for me, that was the ultimate. Yeah.
Set on fire.
Well, it's the thing with British cars, it seems. So for me, that seemed like the ultimate car because it's like add less weight. So just make something as light as possible.
Yes.
And I guess I saw a Valkyrie at Myra testing, and that thing looks like looks and sounds bonkers. I actually saw a Valkyrie and a Project One were both testing at Myra like in the same week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was super interesting. The Project One genuinely sounds like a Formula One car. It's like Mercedes have just
really
stick that engine in there and see what happens. And the Valkyrie, I'm sure you've heard them. They just sound beautiful.
Except, the Valkyrie sounds like what a Formula One car should sound like.
It's like going to a festival of speed and watching all the Formula One cars from like the 60s or whatever they come up the hill.
Yeah.
And you get to like the 80s and 90s, you're like, this is amazing. And then the turbocharged era appears and you're like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. It's just not as good. You do a bunch of like testing in the winter and stuff like that. I thought we'd cover one of the topics that comes up. I think probably most people know the answer to this one or the answers, but around winter tires versus all-weather tires. Sorry, winter tires and all-weather tires and summer tires, and then front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, blah 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 blah, all of that. Can you give us like an overall summary on what's better than what situations, and possibly general advice?
A complicated question. We've been going quite a while now, so I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. Okay, winter tires are the best in winter. Generally, in snow and ice, ice particularly, a winter tire will have an advantage over an all-weather tire because it's more siped. And do you have much American audience? Because there's some naming conventions I need to clear up. So in the UK, we have all-season tires and winter tires and summer tires. We don't have an all-weather tire.
Okay.
America has an all-season tire that doesn't exist in Europe. So if you're American and you're hearing me say all-season, I actually mean all-weather because that's the same. So a modern all-season tire, or all-weather tire if you're American, has way more performance in the snow than a summer tire. But as technology is improving, they're slowly for smaller cars, I would say, they're slowly getting closer to a summer tire. So the disadvantage you have with a siped tire, so a winter tire and an all-season tire is siped, which is those very thin cuts in the tire to give you edges and block movement, and it has a softer compound. The biggest disadvantage is always dry braking, just because the forces in dry braking cause all these sipes to like splay open as they're designed to do in snow, but it reduces the amount of rubber in contact with the road and then reduces grip quite significantly. They're getting better in dry handling, so something like a Michelin Cross Climate 2 is getting closer to a summer tire in dry braking. The Cross Climate 2 is now better than a lot of winter tires in snow, but it does give up a little bit in the wet. So depending on what tire and what category you're looking at, there's always a balance, which is why sites like Tyre Reviews exist and independent testing exists to tell you exactly what tire is good at what, so you can pick your own solution. As for drivetrain, so sorry, to go back to the all-season versus winter tire, I think for a lot of the UK, if you want to swap tires every year, an all-season tire can be a better option than a winter tire, because the all-season tire still has the compound that doesn't harden up as much as a summer tire when it's cold and wet. So that's the advantage for the majority of the British winter. And then for that 3 days every 6 years we actually get snow, an all-season tire will massively outperform everything else on the road because everyone's just on summer tires and everyone's sliding around. Drivetrain, obviously all-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive. You have, so the thing you notice most when testing, when doing the comparative between the two drivetrains, is you have so much traction, you don't realize, even on a winter tire, you have so much traction from all-wheel drive, you don't realize how little braking you have when you arrive at the corner. So it almost lulls you into a false sense of security that you're launching yourself out, and on the road, you'd be like joining a country road at like speed, accelerating up no problem, then get to the first corner and be sliding off. So there's 100%, there's a massive advantage in terms of traction with an all-wheel drive system, especially in the snow. But you've just got to recalibrate because that traction only exists in acceleration. And arguably, because the vehicle's heavier, you have less ability to turn and brake, although marginal. And then front wheel drive versus rear wheel drive. I've actually just tested this with Goodyear this year, and the video will be out at the end of this year. So I did a full video on it. I thought front wheel drive was going to be better. We did acceleration and handling and a hill start, and rear wheel drive was better. Both cars were on. It was an Audi A4 and a BMW 3 Series, both exactly the same, essentially exactly the same way. It was as close as I could humanly possibly make it between front and rear wheel drive. Same power, both 2-litre diesels, and the BMW had the advantage in pretty much every. The only advantage the Audi had was when the traction control systems were off. The Audi allowed a bit more slip at the rear. Obviously, being front wheel drive, it doesn't have to be so nervous about throttle oversteer. So that allowed you around the handling lap a bit better. And it just felt like the traction control system was a little less draconian during acceleration tests, because to accelerate on snow, you need about like 15% slip is optimal, and the BMW wasn't allowing any slip. But with all the systems off, the BMW obviously more fun to drive because it's rear wheel drive. And it was like, we did some hill testing, like on a 15% snowy incline. And me and the other test driver borrowed from Goodyear, who was an Audi fan. So he was in the Audi, I was in the BMW, and we were convinced the Audi was going to win. And we ran it a couple of times, and every time the BMW, so we were swapping lanes because obviously not all snow's equal. So we were swapping over backwards and forwards. And every time the BMW won, and we're like, this is so strange. And then that evening we discussed it, and we're like, what happened? Like how?
Surely
and
it's weight.
Maybe because
it's the
weight transfer a little bit, but the Audi should have the advantage because the weight's over the driven wheels. Whereas the BMW
but not as soon as you start moving.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, obviously there's weight transfer with acceleration, but when you're slowly creeping up a 15% incline on snow,
it's not like you're miles an hour.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're launching back. Obviously, there's some weight transfer with that. Yeah. So we went back the next day. I was like, can we please make some time to rerun that test? We went back the next day. Different conditions, like it was still snowy, obviously, but the temperature had changed. Like the track had been regraded because obviously we grade it with a pactor, and we ran it again, and then the BMW won again. So we were like, oh, come on, let's do a slightly like a 10% incline, so it's less extreme. Surely the Audi will win, and then the BMW won again. So like we're both like, okay, myth busted. Rear wheel drive is better. So obviously with appropriate tires, because if you've got no grip, you've got no grip, and on the road, obviously front wheel drive is easier to manage. But in this test scenario, the BMW definitely had.
Did you try any of this? Is like a bit left field. Did you try any of the cars reversing? Like put them both. So rear wheel drive, reversing up a hill.
Actually, I should have done. That would have been amazing. Yeah. No, we should have tried that. I didn't think of that. Maybe next time I'll do that. Because I've done the test, like put a load of weight in the back of something, and that genuinely helps as well.
Okay.
So I tried that with the truck. We put like 200 kilos in the back, or 200 pound in the back of this pickup truck, a VW Amarok, and then ran it in rear wheel drive. And it was across traction and handling. There was a significant. I thought during handling, the extra weight, because obviously you're not only you accelerating that weight, you're slowing it down and you're turning it. I thought during handling, there's no way there would be an improvement, but there was an improvement with the extra weight in as well. I'll try reverse next time. Yeah,
because I took I have a backdated 911 SC. I took it to Sweden with some mates. Put it on some winter tires, Continentals, winter contact or something.
Oh, winter. That's the Central European winter tire. There'll be the TS8 50, 60, 70s, the TS8 30,
something like that. Yeah.
If it's a winter contact, that's technically a Central European tire and not designed for that kind of. If you're in North Sweden, that's not the optimized tire for that condition.
So what is the optimized tire? I can't remember what it was. I just looked up winter tires.
You have. So that will be the tire you'll buy in the UK, because Nordic winter. So you've got another category of tires, which is Nordic winter tires, soft compound winter tires, extreme winter tires, it's studless friction winter tires, whatever you want to call them. It's essentially a tire that's more designed for snow and ice. So for getting studded tires, it's a much softer compound, much more siping, and the difference they make on like compacted snow and ice is quite significant. But you give up so much dry performance; they're just not appropriate for somewhere like the UK that doesn't see much snow. Yeah, but you won't find anyone running a Central European winter tire up in the Nordics or the north of Sweden.
Yeah, the that makes sense then. Because on snow, it was all right. Like, it was okay.
Yeah.
As soon as you got anything compacted at all, it was not great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the main thing, I think, was I just tried to find a tyre in the size in the UK.
Yeah.
I think that's where you probably have the problem.
And it's probably quite an odd size as well. It's probably quite, if it's an old 911, it's probably a weird pairing of sizes anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's odd. But that had so much grip, full stop. Like, just surprised, like immensely surprised versus someone had it for an M6. Like, everyone was on winter tires. Some people had studded tires. Some people had some crazy Scandi, like 600 massive studs on their tires.
The WRC styles tires, yeah.
Yeah. Which one guy had an RS6 and he had these stupid tires. And I swear, and he was like, yeah, on these tires, on ice, it's like driving on tarmac. like you just stop. But that was a really interesting experience. And that, I was shocked, not shocked, how much grip moving forwards that 911 had. Because it's just all that, I guess it's just...
Yeah, you've definitely got the weight in the right place.
Stuff.
911s in snow are a joy, genuine. I've not driven an older one like that, but I'm sure it was a fun experience.
Yeah, it was wicked.
Yeah, you must have learnt some things about car dynamics as well, driving something like that on ice or snow and ice on those tires.
And reading the environment and going, basically, on an ice track, it was fine for about 2 laps until everyone had like pushed all the snow off it, and then it was just sheet ice, and that was it was pretty much impossible.
In those conditions, you need to follow around the guy with the big studs, because they rough up the ice so much. You can essentially get an ice surface to grip almost like tarmac. Because I did a test with Pirelli that again will come out this fall or this autumn, and we did a road studded tire, so the Pirelli Ice 02, which is a very, very good road tire, studded road tire, against the WRC. It was the WRC Sweden tire from 2021.
Okay.
And that's obviously, it's like nearly 307 millimeter studs, completely illegal on the road. But on ice, like, you can't, but like, it sounds so intimidating just driving on the ice, because it's like, but we did that test, and then obviously the right ice surface was completely ruined. And the next day I had some Central European winter tires on a Tesla Model 3 Performance. I was like, I'm just going to see what it's like on ice. And the ice was so rough. I was doing almost the same lap time as this rally car on studded tires on this Tesla on Central European winter tires. But then, so I was 5 seconds off in the lap. It was only like a 35, 40 second lap. Yeah. But then the second you went slightly offline onto the stuff that hadn't been ruined by the rally tires, you had, like, I put this Tesla into a snowbank so far. So I was going so fast, and then I had absolutely zero grip. I was like half a tire width off, and I'm like, shit. And you're going straight to the scene of the accident. So yeah, it makes, like, ice testing is the most difficult testing in the world, because you'll go, like, I was testing up in Finland, doing some ice testing for a soft winter tire. I'd spent 3.5 hours ice testing. It was an overcast day. The temperature was nice and stable. And then there was a break in the clouds for like half an hour, and the control tire went 2 seconds a lap slower. So at that point, you're like, I've got to throw out the data. So I've wasted half a day. Now it was almost finished. I was on to like nearly the last set of tires, and the sun comes out, and then it's not fair for everyone. So you have to start again. The next day. So ice testing's horrible, which is why people ask, like, why aren't you testing ice for this kind of tire, like an all-season tire? It's like, it's too expensive and time-consuming to do for a tire that very rarely sees ice. Yeah.
And that sort of situation, like, no. It was, I've done a bunch of, not tons, but a reasonable amount of ice driving. I don't know, like 10 days or something like that now. And originally I was like, I want to do this in a rear-wheel drive car because it's fun. But like, the more I drove and the more cars I drove, if I was on a winter tire, 4-wheel drive, I much preferred, because you've just got more options. You've got the option of pulling forwards, even when you're like going off and sideways.
You're almost going in backwards, and you've just got that, okay, I'm just going to plant the throttle and try and pull the front around and pull it together. No, I agree. And I did a test with a Audi A4. It was an Ultra. versus a BMW X Drive. So it was the Ultra Quattro system, which is it's like Audi's version of the Haldex. So it's primarily, instead of being a proper Quattro system, it's primarily front wheel drive, and then switches to the rear when it's detected it needs it. But when you're on such a low grip surface like snow or ice, it's kind of spinning all four wheels most of the time anyway. So it's not actually as horrible. In the wet and dry, absolutely give me a proper Quattro. But anything that's driving four wheels, what was I driving? I was driving an X3, an X1 maybe Quattro.
Yeah.
X1 X Drive, sorry. And even that was good fun, just because, like you say, you can start leaning on the throttle a lot more to control the car. And rear wheel drive, as fun as it is, once you're sideways, you've just got to kind of like stay off the power a little bit until you can pull it together.
Whereas, what did I drive? Someone brought a one of those little Audi A1 Quattros.
That must be like a Haldex Quattro as well.
I think so. Yeah. So not like super Larry, but you could like get the back end out. But the main thing is you were just like yoinking the handbrake. It had an actual handbrake, unlike so many cars.
Amazing.
And then once you're set, like then it's just boom, off you go. Let it work it out. It's so much fun. That's that sort of thing.
I'd really like to drive an all-wheel drive 911 on snow or ice. I've never done it, but I imagine
feels really rear-wheel drive. They kind of do anyway, but like that's when I think you really notice, because we had that year we've done this trip a few times, and we took an R8 one year. Which was really
fantastic. Yeah.
And then we did, I took my old 911 the year before that. Then we had a Bentley Continental V8 convertible, which was pretty hilarious.
Interesting.
Too much weight. Yeah. But like, was still pretty fun to drive. When you've got not a lot of grip and you're trying to set the correct, and you want to do like, slightly getting as much angle before the corner. But if you give it too much momentum and you're on just straight winters, like, you've got to judge that. But someone brought a GTS, Gen 1 991 GTS manual that he'd lifted. It's kind of been safari-fied.
Very cool.
That was on a studded tire, and I thought, going from the Bentley to that, the Bentley you could give it a lot of power a lot of the time, and it would sort of work it out. Whereas the 911 was super rear happy, even though it would start pulling, but like the first reaction was like, boom, I'm sideways.
Yeah. I guess the weight balance is something to do with that as well, because you've got the mass of the engine, the pendulum effect. I drove a Taycan Turbo S in the snow recently.
What was that like?
Incredible. I'd been driving a Tesla Model 3 Performance for a couple of days for a test, and Pirelli had this Taycan Turbo S. I was like, can I take it out? And they're like, yeah, cool. And Pirelli are a very cool company to work with. I just did a few laps in that, and it on snow. The only experience I have it is snow and ice, but it felt edgy, it felt like a race car. Like, it felt like a proper developed car after driving that Tesla for so long. And don't get me wrong, a Tesla Model 3 Performance is an incredible. Like, I'll get a lot of hate for saying it, and I'm a pure internal combustion person. I really am. But once you've driven a Model 3 Performance, and think about where Tesla have come from and where they are now in such a short amount of time, it's an incredible bit of engineering. But getting into that Porsche, which is twice the price or three times the price, you could tell it's a really well sorted car. All the little like rough bits around the edges of the Tesla's handling, like in extreme situations on snow, are just gone in the Porsche. Really impressive car.
They do. Like, I drove a turbo. Here we go. Panamera Turbo SE hybrid at Millbrook, back to back with a Taycan Turbo S, and genuinely, sort of ignoring the noise or whatever, the Taycan just feels so much more like solid and agile, and everything. Like, all the weight is at the bottom,
so
and
fast,
massively notice.
Yeah, they're just so
and then
fast.
Especially they are. All those things are crazy fast. Yeah. But I feel like the hybrid, like your hybrid Panamera, your Turbo SE hybrid, I don't think I would love to drive one of those back to back with the Turbo S non-hybrid to see what it's like, because they're so much heavier and it's all like at the front. They're big, heavy cars anyway, but that specifically those two combinations versus Taycan was just. I got out of the Taycan and was like, I just couldn't have a Panamera now. This Taycan is a much better car.
And you think if anyone was going to get it right, it would be Porsche as well. So then you've got like the Cayenne, like the e-hybrid Cayennes coming out. How heavy are they? They must like be similar to the Death Star or a Moon or something.
Yeah. I think
hybrids have their place.
Is an interesting one. Like I think it sort of has its place and it works, but it seems like feels like a real compromise. Like you lose a lot of weight, and if you're driving on the hybrid system, you're not driving a performance car. You're driving a slow sedan, and then it's not a very good electric vehicle at that point.
Yeah, it's not very good in either situation. Yeah. But you do get the advantage of, for your day to day, you can drive on electricity, and then if you need to do a long journey, like if you can only have one car, or you can only afford one car, there is a place for a hybrid if you do need that extended range. Yes, that is more difficult with an electric vehicle currently.
Yeah, totally. But then if you're driving the Turbo SE hybrid, it's just a tax like situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, surely
that's the only reason.
They've produced that to lower the average emissions or something along those lines. They can't actually expect anyone to buy that.
People buy it, but it was for the benefit in kind. Like, so if you run it through a business, it was much cheaper to get Turbo SE hybrid than it was a Panamera 4S.
There we go.
That's why we see everyone in Taycans now, because it's much, much cheaper. Yeah,
which makes sense.
Studded tires. I don't want to keep it for too much longer, but studded tires versus non-studded tires. I would say it's a slightly irrelevant topic being in the UK, but
absolutely
in a sort of winter environment, do many people run studded tires that aren't Sweden, Norway?
Sweden, Norway, Russia, and then some parts of Canada, and maybe some parts of New Zealand. But generally, studded, like in the south of Sweden, I believe you can't drive in Stockholm on studded tires, which is why this soft compound friction tire exists, because studded tires, they genuinely do mess up the road surface. They do offer significant improvement in grip over a friction tire on smooth ice. But now, like on snow, you're probably not seeing any benefit on a studded tire compared to the equivalent, like Nordic friction tire. And on rough ice, you can have quite similar performance between the two now. So studs, so the places you find smooth ice are the places you really need studded tires in those kind of countries, because it's at junctions where a lot of people stop and accelerate, and they just they polish the ice over time. So that's where a studded tire, and that's why those regions use studded tires. But I don't know if they're illegal in the UK, but they're certainly not appropriate. And in a lot of Central Europe, they're illegal to use.
Yeah, I think we were looking at it when we were planning on driving from London to Sweden, like what you can run, and you can't. There's only certain places you can run a studded tire. I think you can run them in like northern Germany, but I don't think you could drive from the UK to, let's say, Stockholm on a studded tire.
No, legally. Probably not. And you wouldn't get into Stockholm, I don't think, on a studded tire anyway.
You can. I think you're not allowed, but I've seen a lot of studded tires.
Okay, right.
But they are awful. One for the road. We had it where we were filming a car next to us, and he slammed on the brakes, and you just see all the sparks just like go like. But and they're definitely dicey. Like on a normal bit of tarmac on studs, like that's not such a good situation.
In theory, they should offer a similar performance to a Nordic friction tire, which we talked about earlier. But a Nordic friction tire in the dry is absolutely dicey compared to like a Central European winter tire or a all-season tire or all-weather tire. So it's just the soft compound and the siping that really, although actually studded tires sometimes have a slightly harder compound than the studless versions, just because obviously they've got a hole in the stud. And Continental invented rubberized stud, which was because noise is one of the other big problems. They're super noisy things. And Conti invented a rubberized stud that did really well in testing, but when it went to market, they had problems with studs evacuating, so studs falling out. during use. So I think they've withdrawn that, but there's definitely some improvements that could be coming in the near future to help improve stud performance. But like we've said, the friction winter tires are getting so good now. There's less and less reason to get a stud.
So if I was going to drive from London to northern Sweden, something like that, via somewhere like Stockholm or whatever, in a car with the plan on doing a lot of wintry driving up there and a little bit of ice lake stuff, what's the move?
I mean, the ultimate move would be summer tires for leaving the UK, change to all seasons as you get somewhere in Germany, change to winters as you get to Sweden, change to Nordics as you get up top, and then studs for the ice. Do you have the ability to change tires? I would probably do what you did before, and that's use a Central European winter tire for the majority of the journey, and then switch to a studded tire if you have the ability up when you're near the ice. Because if you're going to be doing some ice driving, like a studded tire is more fun and it does offer better performance. So that would be my go-to. But if you haven't got the ability to change tires, I would try and import a set of Nordic winter tires
and just run them and deal with it.
Run them. Yeah. It just be a bit careful in the dry and wet
autobahns.
Yeah. Well, the compound's so soft. A lot of the studless tires you won't get much more than the H-rated tire, so you can't do more than like 100 miles an hour on them anyway. So they're so soft they'll heat out and die. So you got to be extra careful on the autobahns.
Yeah, I was amazed at how fast you get used. Like we when we drove the first time, it was like Stockholm up, and you have we were started on just wet roads. Then we had the half. That's the first time you experience that. That is properly crap. Like chunks of like half the road's ice and half tarmac. Super sketchy.
Because you've got to stare at your line so intently. You just got to be like, because I know if I go offline at this speed, I'm in the snow, and you've got to real focus or drive so slowly. Yeah.
But then once you get onto snow and ice, how quickly you're acclimatized to just like 60 miles an hour down this country road seems all right. The only problem, like you said, is T-junctions and things like that, slowing down. But it's crazy how quickly you can adapt to just driving normal speeds.
You understand why there's so many good Swedish and Finnish rally drivers, because you'll be thinking you're flying down this country lane on compacted snow and ice, and some old lady in a Corsa will come right up behind you and sit on your rear bumper. You're like, oh, so I'm not going as quickly as I thought. Yeah, it's nuts what people who've grown up in that environment can just do like naturally.
And they do you see people do like all the like rally drivers that are around there and whatever, watching them drive. And it's like watching them drive home from the track. Everyone drives like an absolute Fruit Loop around there, just like sending it backwards into corners, like tucking their nose into the snowbank. I'm like, mate, what is going on?
Yeah, I think I'm like people getting a bit too excited or showing off in big groups.
Yeah, I think it's an element of that.
Yeah,
but, some serious skills, even in the 15-year-olds we met. Like I think someone had an Audi Quattro that was on like possibly even on summer tires, and we were up in a ski resort, and they had a road that went up to it, and he was just like fully play. The entire time. It was like, fair play.
Do cars ever get damaged on these trips? So it sounds like a recipe for some. And it snow's generally soft, but if you're going far enough, you generally hit hard stuff, especially if the weather's been bad.
That's one of the conundrums of running. If you start to run studs and more grip, you start to go faster.
Yeah.
And then you go off bigger. Lots of Porsche. If you've got a GT Porsche product, the front splitter, when it goes into snow, like rips itself apart because it's like angled down. If you had an Audi R8, I don't know, and you went into some snow, it's actually kind of angled up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a significant lip, so it just goes up rather than down. But yeah, like we haven't damaged any of the cars that I personally and the guys I was with were driving. I say the guys I was with, I mean literally in my car. But other people, loads of front bumpers and stuff like that.
It's
just getting like kind of messed up. but it's what happens when you go off the ice in at like 80 miles an hour into quite solid stuff. What do you expect?
Also, if you've been unlucky with the weather, I was testing at the start of the year in Finland again, doing ice handling, and it's the ice handling track at Nokian it's a sort of almost a kidney bean shaped ice handling, but then they have a snowbank to mark the inside of the course, which is only maybe 2 foot high, and then they have a little bit more ice that they clear, but they don't like prepare that you can drive on. So if you make an error and go off to the inside, you normally like punch through this small snowbank and then you recover and come back. But it'd been some like unusually hot weather and no snowfall, so all this little snowbank had like melted, refroze over the course of like a week. And I made a small mistake. I was like, oh shit, I'm understeering off. So I'm like, instead of trying to like graze the bank, I'm just going to go straight through it, straightened up, and it was solid ice. So I just jumped over this bank, and unfortunately, it's the first test car I think I've damaged testing. I just cracked the bumper where it hit, like sort of buckled on this solid ice, and then lifted the car up and over. And a lot of the cars we use are rental cars as well, so you have to go back to Europe car and explain why there's a cracked bumper. To be fair, they usually know.
It just went off the.
I don't know why.
Went off the road.
Especially in places like Evelo where there's a lot of testing, all the car hire companies know that they're going to testers because you rent them through like one of the tire companies. So it's just a funny world. Never buy an X. I was going to say never buy an X test car or never an X rental car from anywhere that's close to a test track. Like in Spain, there's a big test facility in Idiada in Spain, and the nearest airport. Like if you see a rental Golf there, 100% it's been around Idiada like 1,000 times. Like the thing's just going to feel tired and loose.
Yeah. It's funny. You see these pictures, I think people see of like snow testing, or everyone's driving various cars and whatever, and these big snowbanks. And they're like, oh, it looks so soft.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, it gets wet, freezes, and you're like, no, it's literally like a concrete block around this track that people are driving.
I've heard
a lot of bills.
I've heard stories of like cars literally punching like a Looney Tunes style like hole snows in a particularly tall snowbank where they've gone in so hard, they've gone in so fast, they've come out the other side. The car's been fine. So it is like I went in probably 2 car lengths with that Tesla Model 3 Performance. I'll end up posting pictures on Instagram this winter. But I went in far and the car was not a mark on it. But then sometimes you go
I'm amazed at how much they can survive. And then sometimes
you're just unlucky and you've ruined something with a very small error. But it's testing. Like accidents happen. If you're sliding around on snow on the limit for days at a time, like accidents happen, and it's
going to happen.
Sad part and parcel of testing.
Yeah, but it's fun in the middle. Right. I normally wrap this up with 5 questions.
Okay.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
I've done a few really good road trips around America. And like one of my first ever like long road trips was I had some friends in Vegas. So I flew into LA, picked up a Chevy Tahoe. And then I drove this Tahoe on my own to Vegas, picked up my friends, we did a weekend in Vegas, and then drove up to Yosemite, across to San Fran, and then down Route 1 to LA. And it is a bit of a cliche, but it was just like the views, the driving in the US, like driving's just so easy in America. But that's one that certainly sticks in the mind, just because it was early on in like I was younger. I wasn't so like jaded by doing it for a living. And it was just we had lots of fun with our friends. Like everywhere we stopped was an adventure. So yeah, that's cool. Probably the most memorable.
Those are the best trips. Bunch of mates,
100%. Yeah.
A car.
The US
an adventure.
I know I live here now, so I'm a little bit biased, but the US is probably the best place in the world to road trip, because the roads are like the scenery around a lot of the states is so beautiful, and the roads are generally super quiet. So you can jump on an interstate, stick your cruise control on, and then not have to think about it for 3-4 hours. Nice. I've done a similar road trip around Colorado. We basically did a loop of the state, and it's just like everywhere you look is like a poster card of something beautiful. So yeah, if anyone's ever thinking of road tripping, like, get into the US. Like there's especially the West Coast. There's some stunning.
That's it.
Places.
Coasts.
Yeah.
Sort of
coast and inbound
from coast to coast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Coast to coast would be That's a
No.
gumball, isn't it? Didn't Alex?
Yeah, I did it one year as a photographer. We did coast to coast, and like there's just so much in the
Ooh.
middle that you're just like,
Yeah,
it's just boring.
the Mid East states. Yeah. Wow. How long
Yeah.
did that take you?
A week.
Oh, so you did it pretty quick then.
Yeah, yeah, it was too quick. It was like New York up to Canada, and then back down and across, and Indy 500 and stuff like that on the way.
Wow. Yeah, that's brutal. Yeah, fair play.
No thanks. I wouldn't do it again. Wouldn't choose to do it again. I'll pick a coast and mooch up and down. I think. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life, and then you have on the side something that costs £500, what would they be? So one car, unlimited value.
We already established that Golf is the peak car, so it'd be a Golf. I don't know. Drive one car. Boring answer, GT3 probably. 911 GT3.
Yeah. Which one?
I've not driven the 992, so I'm going to say 992.
Okay. Manual, PDK?
I don't know. Probably manual because it's the one car you drive a lot of, but I do think the PDK is a better car. You're faster in the PDK. It's not too extreme. It's not as extreme as an RS. Like a 4.0 997 RS would be one of my dream cars as well, but I think for everyday life, that might be a bit much, but a GT3, beautiful. And then what can you get for £500 now? I'm a little bit out of the loop.
I have no idea. Honestly, no idea.
No, I don't know.
Everything's expensive.
I'd find something practical and big. Like Alex Kirsten is very good at finding like a BMW.
Smash this question.
A 330D touring, like an E46 330D touring. He'd find one for 500 quid, so I'll take that. Bit of practicality. Yeah.
I think when I asked him this question both times, he's like, I don't need the other car. Just give me £500. I'll find my favorite car.
Just give me a 330D touring and he's happy. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What should be worth more?
That's so difficult because everything's gone so crazy. Like everything's expensive now. If you'd asked me sort of 10 years ago, I'd have said an LFA or Carrera GT because they were trading hands for like 150 or something. But now obviously they're definitely not. I've just picked up a Porsche Cayenne in the US and they are incredibly cheap here. Like I paid $20,000, so equivalent of about £16,000 for it's a 958. So not the original generation, the second generation Cayenne. It's the Cayenne S. So it's the 4.8 V8. It's 84,000 miles, 2011, fully spec'd. So I think that kind of vehicle for the US is quite undervalued at the moment. And then I bought it to turn it into like an overland. I'm going to jack it up, put massive wheels on it, put like a rack on it. Yeah. So it's going to be a bit of an American freedom overland project. But considering I bought that for $20,000 and like a Toyota 4Runner in similar mileage is going to be like $40,000, it's like, that's a pretty undervalued car at the moment. But in the UK, I've lost track of what's what because everything seems expensive.
Was that on normal suspension rather than air?
No, it's on air.
Your car?
I got it on air on purpose actually because then you can play with it a little bit more. You can lift the cars on air now. There's a company called Eurowise Performance who make lift kits for both spring and air, right? Although it has got a leaking airbag, which is annoying. So if I leave it parked overnight on a higher than like the low setting, I come out and it's like it's taking a wheel or something. It's cocked its leg, so that needs to be fixed. But it was a project car, so I knew it had some issues. Yeah,
that's cool. I was chatting to someone else about those today of that sort of early Cayennes, like. They're relatively cheap. And you look at them like, this is a good car.
It's a lot of cars.
There's a good car.
Yeah. If you get the V8s, from what I understand, if you get the V8s, they're generally, the engines are pretty reliable. There's some gearbox issues or transfer case issues with some of the generations. But I think in the UK, you could probably pick up a 2008 Cayenne for like £5,000-6,000. And that's a lot of car for your money. Admittedly, at the moment with fuel prices, it's probably not the best car to be buying because they're so expensive. But they're in very good value.
Porsche would have spent more money on the tyres testing than like some people spend on their like their entire car.
Yeah. So they're very well engineered. And I drove a new Cayenne recently, or the one that's about to be facelifted up in Sweden, and beautiful pieces of kit. I mean, it's a Porsche. I don't know why I'm saying this, because it's just obvious it's a good car. Yeah. I hate myself for saying that. Yeah. Why?
Right. Most interesting car to you at the moment?
Qualify that question. Like what's a dream car, or what's like the most interesting new car coming?
Forefront of your mind, like I've been looking at.
I'm always looking at Carrera GTs and LFAs. Does that count?
Okay.
Like anytime anyone says like what's the car, I'm like Carrera GT or LFA. Just I've got a thing for V10s. But I think
I would say they're quite different, aren't they? Those two cars, really. They're similar.
Never driven either.
Like same, but different.
Yeah.
I've not driven either. But like kind of a different ethos. One's more of like a GT. I would say the LFA more GT.
Yeah, if Japanese. It was between the two, it'd be the Carrera GT for sure. But they both make that a V10 noise, and they're both incredible pieces of engineering. But anything that's sort of semi-race car is firmly at the front of my mind.
Carrera GT. It's one of those cars. I need to drive one. I need to get. If you've got one, and I know people that have got one.
Get out of Tom.
I don't know one. Let me. Yeah. He ain't gonna let me drive it. He doesn't drive it.
True. Yeah. They're so valuable.
That's probably on original Tyres.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I did speak to him actually, doing a video with it because Michelin rehomologated a set of tyres for the Carrera GT. I think it was a set of Cup 2s that really improved the dynamics of the car. We spoke briefly about doing something with that, but it never came out of it. And then I think he's realised it's so valuable now. Like, I would never drive a Carrera GT round track. Like, I'd be terrified.
Yeah.
Not just because of the value, but if you write off a Carrera GT, that's one of very few cars that's never coming back. Like I just feel bad for the scene. Like, you've written off.
Is it write-offable now?
I mean,
with the current values, maybe not.
Write-offable if you crash it hard enough.
I mean, if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
I would drive someone's Carrera GT round track if they let me. Okay. I'd give it a go.
You're a braver man than
I would be careful and sensible.
Yeah.
But I could drive it at 30 miles an hour.
True, yeah.
So you'd start with that. You'd be like, I'll drive it at 30 miles an hour.
But I wouldn't. That's the thing, I know myself. It's like one of the reasons I've never really pushed myself to go lap the Nürburgring. Because you'd be like, I'll be sensible, it's fine. And then 3 corners in, you're flat out sideways. And then 5 corners in, you're on your roof.
Yeah. I could see that happening. I've never driven the Nürburgring. And there is part of that. Because I also know I've done a lot of sim laps, and that's not the same thing.
No, but it gives you the I know what corner's next. I know, it definitely gives you the confidence.
Flat.
It's definitely flat in that made-up car in Gran Turismo.
Yeah, exactly. That we're hoping the modelling is correct.
Yes. And the tyre, Michelin, the tyre, they did some tyre modelling with Sony for Gran Turismo 7, which is quite interesting. They're the official tyre supplier. I don't know how deep it went, but it's a bit of trivia.
I've been playing it, and I've noticed, and I probably should go back and try some of the early ones to notice the difference. But I feel like there is now a significant difference, and it might have been only old ones, between the sort of sporty road tyres and the slick tyres. Like the way they handle is much more representative of what a slick and how, let's say, it starts to slide. If you do the race, put a set of the slicky tyres on any road car, they get significantly more edgy, significantly more.
Good.
Which is good.
Yeah, that means maybe the Michelin influence has helped along the way. I've had no official data about the partnership. I just know there is a partnership now.
The only thing which I was disappointed at, and I'm eternally disappointed by sim racing games, is they model the wet, and they've started modeling changeable wet now. But wet sim driving is not the same as wet track because they don't model the smooth surface and tyre tread when that gets wet. So the racing line is not slippy.
But is there? I'm not massive into sim racing. It's something I keep meaning to pick up. But wouldn't the counter argument be that Gran Turismo is actually more an arcade sim, and like R Factor and iRacing, they do model
none of the sims model a wet line,
a greasy.
They
wet
all
line.
just lower the grip.
Interesting.
So you would always race the racing line in a sim, which if you do that in real life, you are so far off the track. It's not even funny.
Yeah. You need the sort of the karting wet line where you're just like you're chopping over.
Yeah.
You're
exactly
as far away from the racing line as you can possibly be.
Yeah.
Like, it's
exactly.
incredible the difference it can make as well.
Yeah. And I think that would be, I want to be able to practice that in a game.
Yeah.
And then bring that back to real life where it's you can only
what's your
practice
sim
in real
setup?
life.
I assume you have a decent sim setup then.
It's evolved a lot in the last 2 years. So it's gone from just, I can't remember what wheel I had. A wheel and pedals with the PlayStation. Now I've got a PC and I've got a Fanatec DD Pro, their new sort of like low-end direct drive wheel.
Yeah, the cube thing.
With like a fancy set wheel, yeah. And then their V3 pedals and a big wraparound. I've got one wraparound sort of screen.
Is it one of the Samsung's 49-inch ultra wides?
Mine is it's like a Dell Alienware one. And then I've got a handbrake, but I'm trying to work out how to mount that at the moment. And I've got a seat and a rig, and nothing moves. It rapidly escalated, but it's escalated over like 7 years of just slowly chipping away. And to be honest, the PC games, like Assetto Corsa on that setup, is so much better than even the console version with the same stuff.
Yeah.
Just the feel. Even now playing Gran Turismo 7, I have to run a slightly different. The actual wheel I have to run is different because it has to be PlayStation compatible.
Oh, okay, but yeah, of course.
It feels like an arcade. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but the graphics aren't as good, and it feels like a little bit more arcade. There's certain arcadey stuff in it. Like there's not the fine texture that you get in the other games, but it's a lot of fun. It's too much fun.
I built myself a big editing. I called it an editing rig, so it was a work expense, but it was like a RTX 3090, and it's shipping over from the UK now. So when that arrives, I'll be getting I sold my. It was too expensive to ship, like the sim seat and everything I was using there. But once it arrives here, I plan on rebuilding it, and maybe I'll see you on some sim racing sometime.
Yeah. I'm on like all the games,
which is the best though.
So I like dicking around in Assetto Corsa and like loading up various like car mods. So like a GT3 RS MR or something like that. And then messing around. I did try some iRacing and I quite like it, but I don't like how if you go to like the faster stuff, a car that doesn't have ABS in iRacing, and that is really difficult to drive.
That's hard on a sim. You don't have you
don't
have the momentum change as the tire locks. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, you literally have none of that stuff. So that massively puts me off iRacing. And at the moment, I'm just playing Gran Turismo 7, modifying cars and putting wide body kits on them and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of my friends are on GT, so I can't find a PS5 in the US at the moment.
Yeah,
they're just non-existent still, which is insane.
They'll get there. I eventually, at the end of last year, because I'd said I'm not buying one for more than retail. I'm not doing it. And then I ended up buying a package. It came with like a game and some other stuff, and I was like, okay, whatever.
That's also, I mean, I could go buy a PS5 off Amazon today, but it'd be $1,000, and the retail on it's $399. So there's just I'm not that desperate.
No, exactly, and we'll get there. Like it will get to the point.
Well, will we? China's just being hit with COVID again, so we're going to have.
Yeah, so 1,000 might seem cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Like buy them in bulk for 1,000, you'll probably make a lot of money.
Yeah, people did. That's why they're 1,000. Annoyingly.
Yes.
Final question: 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Carrera GT, shock.
One of, yeah.
I would probably stick an F50 in there.
Nice.
F50 or an Enzo. I'm not entirely sure. Probably the F50, just because it's, again, the F50 was essentially a Formula One engine bolted to a chassis, and it's like that just sounds great to me.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
What would the family car be? Probably a modern Cayman or something. Cayenne.
Yeah.
Or an RS6 or something ridiculous like that. There would have to be a BMW M car in, and then there would have to be a. I would. Is the latest maybe the previous generation M4 CS?
Okay.
So I thought that was very, very good. Or an E46 CSL. Again, just for noise.
Did you do a manual conversion?
No, not on a CSL. The manual is I've had a few E46 M3s, and the manual is the better, but you can't chop up a CSL. Like, surely not. That's like sacrilege. And then there would have to be some sort of 911 in there, sadly. The 992 GT3 RS, whatever that is, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Or a 4.0 997. Yeah, one of those two.
I think that's a good bunch.
Yeah. Maybe an RS6 over the SUV. Yeah. Just because they're cool.
Fair enough.
Audi wagons are just so cool. Like RS4s and RS6s. They just look cool. Like the Audi flare the arches and fill the wheel wells better than almost anyone. Like, how is it disappointing? You buy your F8 Tributo and you get it, and you've ordered the 20-inch wheels or whatever it is, and then you get the car and they're like sat sort of half a foot in from the. It's like, why? Why? It just looks
and there's
so
like
bad.
A fist gap.
I know.
Above
like, why?
The wheel.
Like, why are you doing this? Like,
and they'll say, but it's like 0.1 of a second faster around Fiorano because of the air, whatever, like blah, 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 blah. And you're like, but it doesn't look as good.
Yeah. And like, no one else is testing around Fiorano, so it's a useless metric for us. It's not like you're getting competitive testing there. So, just make it look good. Just fill the arches.
Yeah. Like lower it, widen it a little bit. BMWs, they put this weird lip on them. On their, what was it, M2 competition had it.
The little plastic black lip thing.
The little plastic black lip.
Not sure.
What is that about?
Don't know.
Weird looking thing.
I was wondering if it's because isn't there an EU legislation that says any part of the wheel's not allowed to protrude past the outermost part of the bodywork. So you can't have.
That's probably what it is.
But I'm just wondering if it's to do with that, or whether it's an airflow thing, or whether it's a paint protection thing, or I don't know.
I think it's to do with that regulation of the wheel tire, and therefore, if they want to run the offset and whatever that they want to run, they have to put this tiny little lip on it. And I think you can just take it off. I think you can pull it off.
That's nice. I mean, then you see the stance boys with because it's the tire, isn't it? That's how the stance boys get away with it legally, because it's only because they stretch the tire so bad. I think it's only the wheel that's past the bodywork. The tire is technically inside the bodywork, so it's allowable. I might be wrong on that. I'm not a big stance person, but I think that's the kind of workaround they go for. Which is
do they pass MOTs in those things?
I think so.
Is that
because
they
of
don't
how
do like what?
Because of how the legislation's worded, I think it's a bit of a loophole.
Turn up on bag.
Down. But I mean, whatever floats your boat. I mean, it's people who are enthusiastic about cars, so I'm not saying anything negative about it.
I think they look cool stationary. To an extent, they can get a bit ridiculous, but I remember being in a petrol station and someone with an S3 drove in, and then he parked up and it went and knocked down. I was like, you know what? And it wasn't like ridiculous or anything. I was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, not practical.
I wouldn't do it,
kind of cool. But each to their own. I've got nothing against it. I think if you're enjoying cars,
you're going the other way.
Yeah,
you're going lifted.
Yeah. I'm jacking up. I actually I want to remove one car for a BMW 507. I don't know if you know the 507. So it's from the 60s. It's a 2-seater convertible, sporty-looking car, but it's the most beautiful BMW ever made, and one of the most beautiful cars ever made. And I just think they're so cool. Like, it's nothing you'd expect from BMW. And I think I've got an E24 635 CSI, so I love my old BMWs. But that 507 is. BMW made that. What happened? How have you got a 2 Series active Tourer from that company? Like, why?
Yeah, Fair enough. Right. Thanks very much
thank you
for coming on the podcast.
Sorry it's taken me so long
for a chat.
to get on this. It's obviously moving countries and then being backwards and forwards to Europe, traveling, testing has been tricky. But thank you very much for having me on.